Hello, great people. Here we have our second lecture about neural control and coordination. Because in the first two lectures, first two means it was of course first lecture divided into two parts, part 1 and part 2, and we have discussed more than enough about the brain. Now it's turn for the spinal cord. So today's topic is mainly spinal cord, the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. That means we are going to take the remaining the CNS and also the part of the PNS, peripheral nervous system, because according to one classification the peripheral nervous system will include the autonomic system, but I think I am going to follow the classical way. So I say that spinal cord, which is a part which is left from the central nervous system, and cranial and spinal nerves, they come from the peripheral nervous system. About spinal cord, what we want to learn is general features, general characters, the section, histology, and of course the role. Brain, it has taken a long time to discuss and to understand. It is obvious because it is complicated. Spinal cord is something which is more straightforward because it is something which is probably more of a primitive nature. The brain is developed in the head, and that is called as cephalization. See, head is cephalization. Although cephalization is there in arthropods and mollusks and all, I think in the vertebrate the head formation has become very prominent, and accordingly the brain has become more and more complicated. Spinal cord is more primitive type. Let's go for that. The cord in the spine. Spine is this vertebral column. Brain is here, and the spinal cord will pass through the spine. The spine, this is the spine. The vertebral column. This plastic wire, as you can observe here, which is put up here, you can imagine it is the spinal cord. So, spinal cord is quite protected, well protected. The spinal cord is well protected because of the bones and the vertebrae, the ring-like bones. Just like the skull is the protective structure for the brain, the vertebral column is the protective structure for the spinal cord. So, what is the length? Well, in the books it is being mentioned that the length will be 42 to 45 centimeters. That's quite okay. I think we have some of the common features listed here, and we'll be talking about those features. Here, you can, I think most of these points are already in the notes, so you should be comfortable with respect to that. So here is the length 45 centimeter, but it can be 42 to 45. Diameter, 2 centimeter. Well, in books you can say 2 centimeter, 2.5 centimeter. The variations do occur. It's a cylindrical organ with a cavity that you should know. Basically, it is soft tissue, naturally nervous tissue, and the cord will have gray and white matter as usual. As you can see here, the gray matter is inside and the white matter is surrounding. But we'll come to the histological aspects later on. One thing that we have considered is the vertebral column, that is the spine, and the spine is more than enough for the spinal cord to be protected. But then meninges are there as usual, as you can see here. 3 meninges are there: the dura mater, the arachnoid, and the pia mater. The dura, arachnoid, and pia mater, we have already learned that for brain, exactly the same things. So the 3 covers of the brain continue over the spinal cord. So it's quite well protected. Again, there is CSF between the pia mater and the arachnoid as usual. I think you should know that it has got swellings. I can go for the next diagram of the spinal cord, and you will find that there are 2 swellings here. There is enlargement, cervical region, cervical enlargement, and then there is lumbar enlargement swellings are there. Actually, this is slightly dorsolaterally flattened structure. So the section of the spinal cord will be something like this. This is the section of the spinal cord, and because there is a cavity, it can be seen in the center like this. So although the thickness is 2 to 2.5 centimeters, actually in two regions it will become swollen. The cervical enlargement, which is in the neck region, and this is the lumbar enlargement, which is in the lumbar region. There are plexuses, but I'll talk about the plexuses little later. The end of the spinal cord is somewhat conical, and that is being called as conus medullaris. So what is conus medullaris? The conical end of the spinal cord is called as conus medullaris. And that conus medullaris will continue as a very thin thread, and that is what is called as filum terminale. Conus medullaris, end of the spinal cord, which is conical in nature, and the filum terminale is a final thing, or a thread-like thing. There is no nervous tissue as such there, and that's only a thread that is passing through the last few vertebrae, and that is being called as the filum terminale. So that's it. Then there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves starting from the spinal cord, as you can see here. These are the spinal nerves. There are cervical nerves, 8 in number, thoracic nerves, which are 12 in number, lumbar nerves, which are 5, sacral nerves, which are 5, and coccygeal nerves, because it's the end. So we are going to talk about the spinal nerves later on, but I just want to mention that spinal cord is the structure through which the spinal nerves originate, and the spinal nerves will be passing out through the vertebral column. The end of this spinal cord appears to be like the tail of a horse. Now I will not be able to convince you as to why this is called as the tail of a horse. Cauda equina. What do you mean by cauda equina? Cauda equina, actually, equus is the name of the horse. Cauda means tail. So it is something looking like the tail of a horse. Actually, these terminologies appear because those anatomists who first studied these things, for them it's their imagination that for them it looked like the tail of a horse. So it tracks it. So what is cauda equina? Actually the end, it will include this part, filum terminale, plus lots of nerves. There will be lots of nerves. Last 10 pairs of nerves, their roots. Yeah, it's looking like the tail of a horse. So the filum terminale plus the spinal nerve, the roots of the spinal nerves, last 10 pairs, and that looks like this cauda. This is the thing, but this is in here, cauda equina. So you should know these terms. You should know conus medullaris, you should know filum terminale, you should know the cervical and the lumbar enlargements, you should know that there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves which are originating, and you should know the term cauda equina. It's a hollow structure, so it seems that the central canal, which is here, is filled with the CSF. So just the situation is very similar to that in the brain. Brain also has ventricles, the cavities, and in the cavities there is CSF. So in the brain also the CSF is inside and outside between the arachnoid and the pia. In a similar way here also the CSF will be here and CSF will be outside once again between the pia and the arachnoid layer. I think therefore many similarities do exist. And again, what is spinal cord made up of? Spinal cord is made up of the same nervous tissue, and you will expect cell bodies in the grey matter, because please go back to the earlier picture, and here the grey matter is there, so you can expect cell bodies here, because grey matter always is made up of cell bodies mainly, and of course glial cells, and the white matter is expected to be made up of the fibers, axons, which are medullated axons. Yeah, some of those are seen here. I think these are some of the generalized features of the spinal cord. We can now try to understand in what way the spinal cord is important. I think in your notes you will find the functions of spinal cord. It serves as an assistant to brain. It is too obvious because anything that the brain wants to send to the body, most of the messages which the brain wants to send to the body muscles, it has to pass through the spinal cord. Because a message from the cerebral cortex, the motor cortex, which is trying to guide my hand to move it this way, well, the message has come from the cerebral cortex, motor cortex, through of course the thalamus and the pons and the gatekeepers, and it has to come into the spinal cord. And through the spinal cord, the neural connections will be established, motor neurons will be passing here, and my muscles will contract. So it's very important. So without spinal cord, brain is helpless, because brain is all located here. If suppose it was the responsibility of the brain to ensure that all communications are established, well, then brain would be able to move only this much part, but not the lower part. It's because the spinal cord will accept the information, motor messages, and then it will spread the motor messages. What do you mean by motor impulses? Motor impulses are those which are to bring about the activity, bring about the action. Not only that, but even the sensory impulses, particularly from the entire body, skin, exteroceptors, and some of the interoceptors. Messages will have to go to the brain. And how the messages will go to the brain? They have to pass through spinal cord. That's why it is being clearly mentioned here. It is a highway for impulse conduction. Highway, a nice term, highway for impulse conduction. To and fro, from brain to spinal cord, and from spinal cord to brain. So this is how it must assist the brain. The brain will be helpless without the functioning of the spinal cord. It is not that easy. When you go into your first year of the medical science, you will learn a lot of complex things about the spinal cord. There are lots of pathways. Some pathways I am going to mention later on. There are lots of pathways here. Pathways means the roots taken up by the sensory impulses and the roots taken by the motor impulses. And there are specific locations. And in your first year MBBS, you will be learning the details of a section, and you will have to know which are the different areas and in what way the motor impulses pass and through what directions the sensory impulses pass. Don't worry. You are having at least this much in the state board book. NCERT doesn't mention spinal cord. NCERT does not mention spinal cord details. And that is a book meant for NEET. What a funny thing. So don't believe in the NCERT. It's of no use. We are going into deep details. How can you go to a first year MBBS without knowing the details of the spinal cord? And they are not giving anything. There is no mention of the spinal nerve. There is no mention of the cranial nerves. Just imagine. They are making a joke. The NCERT for this chapter is also making a joke. Why I am criticizing NCERT, you understand? Because I bothered for you. You are the responsible students of learning center who are going to go into medical college, and you should not be a subject of laughter there. That never happens. Of course, those students who go to medical colleges from learning center, they already know a lot of things in depth, and many others who have just parrotized the whole thing and have taken admissions, well, they feel blank once they go there. They don't know what is what. That will not happen. It's not only the matter of giving assistance to brain and to act as a highway for impulses. It has got other special functions, like it is a center for spinal reflexes. Here we are going to consider reflex actions. Normally you know what reflex actions are. Some of the reflex actions have their center in the brain. That means the messages will have to be passed through the brain directly first. They are called as cerebral reflex actions, cranial reflex actions. But then when you think of some of the reflexes which are having the centers in the spinal cord, they will be called as spinal reflexes. What do you mean by spinal reflex? Spinal reflex is that where the message need not go to brain. It will be rebound from the spinal cord. So when messages are directly governed by the spinal cord, they are called as the spinal reflexes. Of course, Ultimately, they will also reach the brain later on, but first the spinal cord will already make sure that the action has taken place, and then the information goes to brain. So this is very important. Many of our reflexes are spinal reflexes. So it is assistant to brain, it's a highway for message conduction, and it's essential for spinal reflexes. I think with this we can go for the histological structure. When I say histological structure, it means it is the transverse section. Okay, let's go for that. You have your diagram sheets as well, and make sure that you are referring to your diagram sheets and notes. I have already mentioned notes page 5 and 6, and diagram sheet diagram 8, 9, 10 and 11. This is a very typical way to discuss histology of spinal cord. That is a transverse section of the spinal cord. As you can see, the image is there. It is dorsoventrally flattened, somewhat oval, you can say, and it has got 3 meninges, which we have already considered. I think you can see the 3 meninges here in a very faint manner, and you have then the dorsal, that is posterior septum, and ventral, that is anterior fissure. Dorsal and ventral, you must understand, this is dorsal side. Dorsal is posterior, and this is the ventral side. Ventral is anterior. Because we are having erect posture, our ventral side becomes our anterior, front side. So, if so, then this is the anterior median fissure. This one. And this is the posterior, that is dorsal septum, like this. It means it is a kind of a membranous partition, and here there is a groove. So what is this? This is dorsal, that is posterior septum. Septum is a partition, and this is not a partition, this is a groove. So this is ventral fissure. Fissure means groove, and that's how the matter, the substance of the spinal cord seems to be divided. That is one thing. There is a central canal here. This is a central canal, obviously. A very tiny central canal, which is lined by ependymal cells. I think when we consider the histological picture of the brain, particularly ventricles, we definitely mentioned ependymal cells. Ependymal cells are columnar in design, and they have cilia, and there are some special cells which are able to generate a current in the CSF. CSF has to flow. Details may not be required. But then very important and interesting will be the grey and the white matter. As you can see, all this is grey matter and all this is white matter. तुम्हाला वाटत असेल की काहीतरी उलट बोलतोय, कारण ग्रे मॅटर व्हाईट दिसतोय आणि व्हाईट मॅटर डार्क दिसतोय. याची कारण स्टेनिंगमुळे. This is actually the transverse section, actual section of human spinal cord, and the grey matter is appearing differentiated because of staining, and the white matter has taken a darker stain. So surrounding is all white matter. So all this is white matter, and all this is the dark matter. Dark matter means grey matter. Grey matter and white matter. This has begun from the pons. Do you remember this? Pons, medulla and spinal cord. Pons, medulla and spinal cord have grey matter inside and white matter outside. The rest of the brain, the forebrain, midbrain and cerebellum, the rest of those things are having grey matter outside, white matter inside. But pons, medulla and spinal cord have grey matter inside and white matter outside. What is grey matter made up of? Grey matter is made up of, it's not written here, but let me tell you, cell bodies. Ultimately it is the grey matter. Even in the brain, the grey matter is made up of what? Cell bodies, and the ends of the axons, because synapses and all will have to be there. And the gray matter will also have non-related part of the axons and the glial cells. Gray matter, whether it is brain or spinal cord, will be made up of the cell bodies, cytons of the cell body, that is cytons. This cell body, this one. And it will also have the ends, because some other neurons will be ending there. So cell bodies and the ends of the axons and glial cells and some non-mediated portion. Mediated portion will form the mediated, that is myelinated portion will form the white matter. Because why the white matter should look white? It will look white simply because this is medullation. Medullary sheath is adipose, this very well, and that will appear whitish. That's it. Actually, the gray matter seems to be distributed in a certain specific manner as the posterior, that is dorsal projections, which are called as dorsal horns. What do you mean by dorsal horn? What do you mean by horn? Horn is a projection throughout the spinal cord. And towards the ventral side, there are ventral horns. Ventral projections are ventral horns. It seems that the dorsal horns are reaching almost to the edge of the spinal cord, but ventral horns are not reaching to the edge, as you can see. While drawing a diagram, you have to be careful. This diagram is already there in the diagram sheet, and you can definitely practice this kind of a diagram. So the gray matter seems to be arranged in the form of an H. So gray matter seems to be in the form of H with the dorsal horns and the ventral horns. The dorsal horns and the ventral horns. Dorsal projections and the ventral projections. And there are some smaller lateral horns, also lateral projections. Can you see lateral projections? So dorsal, lateral, ventral projections. Again, when we are talking of dorsal, ventral and lateral, we are talking of the front side of the body as ventral and back side of the body as the dorsal. You can think of the cylinder. This is a section, transverse section. If you look at the diagram carefully, you will find some terms like funiculi. I think the funiculi terms are missing here, but I think in your diagram sheet you will find the words funiculi. If I want to show it here, so, if this is the outline, this is dorsal funiculus, bilateral symmetrical. This is lateral funiculus, and this is the ventral funiculus. What is the funiculus? Funiculus is a part of the white matter. White matter seems to be divided, because of the fissure, because of the septum, and because of these horns. The white matter seems to be divided as dorsal pieces. Of course, think of the vertical things, and think of the ventral alignment, the ventral matters, the ventral columns, the ventral funiculi, and the lateral funiculi. So you can check this in your diagram number 11. All of you are looking at diagram 11. I'm sure you are sitting with your diagram sheets as usual, as expected. Dorsal funiculus here and here. Lateral funiculus on the sides and the ventral funiculus. So you can then think that this is dorsal horn, this is ventral horn, this is lateral horn, and these are the funiculi. So two dorsal funiculi, two dorsal horns, two lateral horns, two lateral funiculi, two ventral horns, two ventral funiculi. So this is how the geography of the section of the spinal cord can be studied by taking into account the distribution of the gray and the white matter. So you need to draw this diagram, and that will be really good for you. There is something very specific. I think it was mentioned to you that it is acting as a highway for message conduction. Carefully note this. Ascending tracts and descending tracts. Again in the notes at the end of the page 5 I will read. Ascending tracts. These are the sensory or afferent in nature and conduct sensory impulses to the brain. And these are located through in the dorsal funiculi. Because white matter is all axons, I can just draw for you. Imagine through these dorsal horns, dorsal funiculi, the message is passing upward towards brain. Because there will be lots of nerve tracts which are taking a message to the brain, and these are all afferent. That is sensory pathway. It will be starting from the different parts of the body, particularly skin, mainly skin, exteroceptor and some interoceptors, because there can be interoceptors scattered in the body. So they are carrying the impulses to the brain. And the descending tracts, read about the descending tracts. These are motor or efferent in nature and conduct impulses from brain to spinal cord and then to muscles and glands. These are mainly located in the ventral and lateral funiculi. So if you are expecting the message transfer from brain, because afferent or sensory pathway is taking the fibers are taking the messages to the brain, and brain has to send the orders. The orders will be coming through from the brain through the lateral funiculi, and also they will be coming through the ventral funiculus. Remember. So, out of these 6 funiculi, 2 and 2, 4 and 2, 6, 2 seems to be for sensory impulse conduction and 4 seems to be for motor impulse conduction. From this point of view, spinal cord is acting as a highway for conduction. So, but then it's so oversimplified. What is being shown to you is all oversimplified. As you will enter in your first year MBBS, I am trying to remind you that many of you want to go. Of course, even if you don't go, nothing is going to happen. It's quite fine. You can take many other careers. Because human biology is something which you need to know always. So whether you go to medical or don't go to medical, please don't clear your 12th without knowing about spinal cord. It's very necessary. You should know the spinal cord geography. You should know the grey matter and the white matter. The grey matter divisible into horns. Dorsal, lateral, ventral on each side, and the white matter divisible into funiculi, dorsal, lateral and ventral funiculi. So once again, the spinal cord histology, hollow, central canal. The central canal is continuation with the middle oblongata cavity. What is the middle oblongata cavity? The fourth ventricle. So fourth ventricle will continue to this CSF. So the spinal cord CSF and the brain CSF, it's all continuous communicating. And then the grey matter divisible into horns and the white matter divisible into funiculi. I think that is what you can always. Please, I am going to put a question to you. Section level, the section of the spinal cord. It's very common. So this is what you should do. It is oversimplified and there are more complications. But for our purpose, for the 12th, I think generally this is good enough. I think we have completed now the CNS, the brain and the spinal cord is done. Now we go for the peripheral nervous system, and by the traditional classical way of classification of the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system has spinal nerves and cranial nerves. We'll first consider spinal nerves, no doubt, but before that I would like to ask you a question. Are you sure what is a nerve? It's very important, a very basic question. You should know what a nerve is. So, a nerve is a bundle of axons Remember, that's very, very important. It's a bundle of axons. Nerve does not have cell bodies, it has only the long axons. And how many? Thousands and thousands and thousands. And overall, the nerve is like a thread. So nerves are very fine, white, yellowish, whitish thread-like structures. And each of that thread-like structure has got many axons, and so nerve is a bundle of axons. And the nerves can be classified as sensory nerves, motor nerves, and mixed nerves. What do you mean by this categorization? Obvious. Sensory nerves will be those which will be carrying the sensation to the brain. All fibers, axons means fibers. All the fibers, that is all the axons in a sensory nerve will be transferring the messages to the brain. Take the famous example of optic nerve. Optic nerve begins from behind the eyes, and the two optic nerves go to the brain, and all of them are carrying visual impulses from the eyes to the brain. So optic nerve is a purely sensory nerve. Just one example. There can be motor nerves. For example, the oculomotor, the third nerve. We are going to learn those names. We are generally aware: olfactory, optic, and oculomotor. Oculomotor is a nerve which is starting from the brain. Here's what I found. And then carrying the message to the muscles of the eye. So, oculomotor is a nerve, third cranial nerve, which is starting from the brain and carrying the impulses to the muscles of the eye, the oculomotor. So, optic is second nerve, which is carrying sensory impulses from eye to brain, and the oculomotor is a third cranial nerve which is carrying impulses, motor impulses, orders of the brain from brain to the muscles of the eye. And there are some nerves which are having some fibers sensory and some fibers motor, and that's called as a mixed nerve. Let me tell you the example of a mixed nerve. The vagus nerve, for example, is a mixed nerve. Vagus is a 10th nerve and it is a mixed nerve. It will be having some fibers sensory and some fibers mixed. This classification is better applicable to the cranial nerves. With respect to spinal nerves, all spinal nerves are mixed. That means in each of the spinal nerve, there will be some fibers sensory and some fibers motor. For example, if there is a spinal nerve starting from my arm, then it will carry the sensation from the skin and sensation from the muscle to the brain. But when the brain wants to send the motor impulse will be sent through the same nerve. What is motor impulse? The efferent fibers which carry the motor impulse for the order of the brain. So sensory impulse will be going to the brain through the spinal nerve, and motor impulses will also come to the limb through the same nerve, spinal nerve. So, but then it's a mixture. So some fibers will be sensory for carrying impulse from the organ to the brain, and some fibers will be motor to carry the impulse from the brain to the organ, the muscles. That's it. So all spinal nerves are all mixed type. So this is some general information about the nerves, and maybe now you will probably be requiring a good revision for the section of the nerve. Let's go for that. I think it will be good to revise the design of a nerve. I'm saying revise because we have done it under nervous tissue when you were in 11th, and it is likely that you have forgotten. Quite fine. Here is a nerve which is a thread-like structure, and it's an expanded part, enlarged part of the nerve. What does a nerve contain? Nerve will contain many fascicles, that is bundles, and each bundle will have many axons. These are sections because axons will be passing through the nerve lengthwise, and this is a cross section. So each one of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, these are all hundreds and hundreds of them will be together parallel, and they are the axons which are the nerve fibers. And many such fascicles will be there. Each fascicle will have many axons, and many such fascicles will be there. In a nerve, many fascicles. I have drawn 3 because it's just simple. I know it's a schematic presentation. But there will be hundreds of these fascicles, and each fascicle will have many thousands of the axons. That's one thing. Then the different connective tissue covers. Every axon. Suppose axon I am drawing like this. Suppose I have drawn the axon to be like this. Suppose this one axon I have drawn. Axon means it's a lengthwise thing. You can imagine it's an axon. That's an axon. And the axon will be surrounded by a connective tissue membrane, and that will be called as endoneurium. So endoneurium is something that covers every axon, that is endoneurium. Then all these various axonal bundles together will be having another connective tissue cover, and this is connective tissue cover which is here. As you can imagine, this is better. This is what is called as perineurium. So what is perineurium? It's a common cover for several axons. It's a common cover for one fascicle. Every fascicle will have a common cover known as perineurium. And if there are hundreds of fascicles, suppose all of them together will be bound in another membrane, and that membrane will be called as the epineurium. So you can expect the epineurium to be there all over the. So it will be there all over. It will be there all over the nerve. So that's the epineurium. So these are connective tissue membranes. You should know the structure of a nerve. All nerve, whether it is sensory, motor, or mixed, a nerve will always be having this kind of organization. Please make sure that you are all able to remember this. This is very necessary. Let's have an overall idea of the spinal nerves. You already know there are 31 pairs. Here or here you can check them. And these spinal nerves have distribution like 8 are cervical, 12 are thoracic, 5 are lumbar, 5 are sacral, and 1 is coccygeal. 11, and you have handled the vertebral column. Because there are vertebrae, cervical vertebrae, then thoracic vertebrae, then lumbar, and the sacral vertebrae. So those nerves which are passing through the cervical region, I can just once again help you with the vertebral column. You can expect. So these are the cervical vertebrae, and the nerves which are coming out through the cervical vertebrae. Here, nerves which are coming out from the cervical vertebrae, they will be the cervical nerves. The nerves which are coming out from the thoracic vertebrae, they will be the thoracic nerves. The nerves which are coming out from the lumbar vertebrae, they will be the lumbar nerves. Sacral, I can't show you here because sacral is a sacrum, that you already know. So I'll assume that is a sacrum, and that is not, I'm not holding it. So there is a sacrum region, and through that the sacral vertebrae will pass. So 8 plus 12 plus 5 plus 5 plus 1, coccygeal spinal nerve. So that is why it is 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and I have already told you they are all mixed. In the region of the cervical enlargement, there is what is called a cervical plexus. Just below that, where the arms are originating, from that region, of the spinal cord, I mean where you can think of the origin of these arms, there is what is called as the brachial plexus, and then there is what is called as lumbar enlargement that you already know, and there is just below that there is lumbar plexus, and then there is a sacral plexus. What is a plexus? Cervical, brachial, lumbar and sacral. A plexus is a networking type of a thing. You know, the spinal nerves are emerging out, they are branching, and the branches of different spinal nerves are getting mixed, branching and mixing, so that, you know, even if suppose there are only a few spinal nerves, suppose in this particular region, if there are only say 8 of the cervical nerves, well, these 8 cervical nerves will get mixed together and get redistributed with many branches. So these plexuses, cervical, brachial, lumbar and sacral plexuses are the places, are mechanisms, arrangements through which more and more muscles can be covered. So that is the meaning of the plexuses. Don't get confused. Plexuses are different, and swellings are different. Cervical enlargement and lumbar enlargement. These are enlargement where the spinal cord width is increased. And when you think of the plexuses, very close to the cervical enlargement, there is cervical plexus. Below that there is a brachial plexus. Then there is a lumbar enlargement. Below that there is a lumbar plexus, and then there is a sacral plexus. This much if you know, you should be happy, because there is no end to the details. But all these things are already mentioned here. That's very clear. What more to say? All spinal nerves have double origin. It's very important. I think we'll go for a diagram next one, and then I can show you the double origin. Look carefully. Suppose this is a spinal nerve. This is a spinal nerve which is starting from spinal cord. It has got a double origin because one component of the spinal nerve is here and another component is here. One component here, another component here. One and second, one and second, one and second. So each one of the spinal nerve has double origin. When we are going to learn cranial nerves, that time I am going to say that cranial nerves has single origin. That means it will start as a lump sum stock, a cranial nerve, a vagus nerve, or an optic nerve, or maybe the glossopharyngeal. They will all starting from as a block from one place. Here they are starting from 2 different places, so that's how they are double. So spinal nerves are all mixed and they have a double origin. There is a dorsal root and there is a ventral root. Let's go for the understanding of the dorsal and the ventral root in the next diagram. Understand, this is a dorsal root and this is a ventral root. Clearly, the dorsal horn continues into dorsal root and the ventral horn continues into ventral root. You already know the terminology, dorsal horn and the ventral horn. So dorsal horn continues into dorsal root, ventral horn continues into ventral root, and these 2 roots join, meet together, and then the spinal nerve is produced. This is your diagram already in your diagram sheet, and you can study this diagram number 10. So this diagram 10, which is already here, is exactly the same diagram. Study this diagram and you should practice this diagram. Very important thing for spinal nerve understanding, that every spinal nerve has double origin. That means from the dorsal side there is a dorsal root and from ventral side there is a ventral root. Root means the origin, and the 2 roots are meeting together, and that is what is being called as the spinal nerve. The continuation of the dorsal horn into dorsal root and the ventral horn into ventral root means a lot, because the distribution of the neuronal connections, I'm talking of the distribution of the neuronal connections, follow the dorsal ventral roots. How? We are going to learn it later on, because the topic later on we are going to be reflex arc and reflex action. I just make a quick mention here that there is a swelling that is called as dorsal root ganglion. What do you mean by ganglion? Ganglion is a swelling. And in the dorsal root ganglion, there are cell bodies. I can say that in the dorsal root ganglion, there are cell bodies of sensory neuron. I'll draw it and show it to you. So this is the dorsal root. And suppose the ventral root. This is the ventral root. And the two are meeting together here, and spinal nerve is being produced. So here I can say this is the dorsal horns, which is continuing to dorsal root, and the ventral horns will, the lateral horn and the ventral horns will continue to the ventral root. Remember, see, the sensory neuron will be located here. So I'll draw a sensory neuron here. The cell body of the sensory neuron is here. Are you understanding what I am trying to say? I have drawn a sensory neuron. Sensory neuron has cell body, and the cell body of the sensory neuron is located in the dorsal root ganglion. That is what is being shown here. So this dorsal root ganglion is seen swollen because there are many cell bodies. You don't expect that there will be one cell body. There will be thousands of cell bodies. Thousands and thousands of cell bodies will be together, and because of which this will be swollen, and that is why it is being called as a dorsal root ganglion. Because it is on the dorsal root, it is being called as a dorsal root ganglion. Hundreds and thousands of cell bodies will be there. This is going to be the dendron, and this is going to be the axon of the sensory neuron. So a sensory neuron will have a dendron, which is entering into the spinal cord, and the direction is this one. Is the direction, impulse is being conducted. Impulse is being conducted toward the central nervous system. Impulse is being conducted. So this is sensory neuron. But this is dendron. Dendron is wrong. Normally, what you expect? Normally, when we draw, this is axon and this is dendron, right? You call this as dendron, and we call this as axon. Fine, that is correct. But that is for most other neurons. For sensory neurons, see, the situation of the sensory neuron is such that this is the dendron and this is the axon. So, what is speciality of the sensory neuron? A sensory neuron will have a shorter axon and a longer dendron. Here dendron is small, axon is long. This is normal. This is the normal, regular neuron that we consider. But for a sensory neuron, dendron is long and axon is short. This dendron will begin from sense organ. Suppose from the sense organ, from skin it begins, and there will be a long dendron, and the cell body will be located here, and axon will be short. Please understand this very well, because that's how spinal cord understanding will make your understanding of the reflex arc and reflex action easy. I'll repeat what I have tried to say. I'm trying to say that sensory neurons have long dendron and short axon. Most of the neurons have short dendron, long axon. Sensory neurons are exceptions. Dendron is very long, maybe sometimes 2-3 meters long, from skin to the spinal cord. You can imagine, from skin to spinal cord. And that sensory, the dendron of the sensory neuron is passing through the spinal nerve, through the dorsal root, and the cell body is located here. And the dendron is ending here because the cell body is there. And then the axon begins. And axon may be just a few centimeters, because the length of the axon will be much shorter. It will be starting from the cell body and will be entering into the gray matter. Remember, this is very necessary. Now there will be an intermediate neuron, which itself is the dendron is short, axon is also short, And then now there is a motor neuron, and the motor neuron will have again normal, and the axon of the motor neuron is passing this way, and the message is being conducted in the reverse direction. Remember this. Sensory neuron, the long dendron entering through the dorsal root, its cell body is located here, and hundreds and thousands of cell bodies of many sensory neurons come together. That's how there is a swelling. And the axon is passing through the dorsal root, and then it is entering into the grey matter, and in the grey matter there is an intermediate neuron, middle neuron, and then there is a motor neuron. There is a motor neuron. So I will label this, name this as motor neuron. Where is the cell body of the motor neuron? Cell body of the motor neuron is in the grey matter. And where is the cell body of the sensory neuron? That is not in the grey matter. That is there in the dorsal root ganglion, and the axon is passing into the grey matter. And the cell body of the motor neuron is here, and the axon, this is axon, this is dendron, and this is axon, and the axon is carrying the message to the muscles. And the entire intermediate neuron is totally present in the grey matter. So the grey matter of the spinal cord will have axons of sensory neuron. Grey matter of the spinal cord will have axons of sensory neurons, all various intermediate neurons, and cell bodies of motor neurons. And the axons of the motor neurons will be passing through the ventral root. This is a dorsal root, this is a ventral root. And when it is a spinal nerve, you can imagine this is a spinal nerve. And through the spinal nerve you have messages coming to the brain and messages going away from the brain. That is the reason why the spinal nerves are all called as mixed nerves. Okay? This is very important. In fact, what I have drawn is already a reflex arc. What I have drawn is already a reflex arc that you know very well. But we'll consider that little later on. So this is the dorsal root and that is the ventral root concept. So dorsal root and ventral root together make the spinal nerve. Actually, the entire part, the dorsal ventral root and then joining together occurs inside the vertebral column. I'll once again show the vertebral column. So you can expect that in the vertebral column, a spinal nerve will come out. You can expect the spinal nerve to come out through these holes. What are these holes? These holes are the intervertebral foramina. Here also intervertebral foramina. So on both sides you have intervertebral foramina. Why are the intervertebral foramina? They are for the passage of nerves. The intervertebral foramina here and intervertebral foramina here is for the passage of the nerves. So the nerve part, the spinal nerve part will pass, and the joining of these two will be taking place inside the vertebral column. So before the spinal nerves emerge out, of this vertebral column, the dorsal and the ventral roots meet inside. But then when the spinal nerve emerges out, it again divides into three branches. And here probably some students may have confusion. Dorsal and ventral roots together make a spinal nerve, and that spinal nerve makes an exit from the vertebral column, and once it makes an exit, it gets divided into three branches. Each branch is being called as a ramus, and you can check this in your diagram 10 and also read about this information on page number 6, formation of the spinal nerve. Each spinal nerve has double origin, dorsal, ventral root, etc. And each spinal nerve divides into the following three branches: ramus dorsalis, ramus ventralis, and ramus communicans. You have to remember this very carefully. Ramus dorsalis, ramus ventralis, ramus communicans. That is what is mentioned here. So three branches are ramus dorsalis, ventralis, and communicans. It means that each of the spinal nerve, which is making an exit from the vertebral column, will divide into branches. Where is ramus dorsalis being supplied? Ramus dorsalis is a short dorsal branch which is supplied to the skin and muscles of the dorsal part of the body. Obviously, this will go to the dorsal part of the body. And then obviously ramus ventralis, what will happen? A longer branch. Because ramus ventralis, because the spinal cord is dorsally placed, naturally the dorsal branch will be shorter and the ventral branch will be longer. It has to come, suppose here are my muscles, here is my skin and muscles, and the ventral branch has to come to a longer distance. So ventral branch is longer. Ventral ramus ventralis is longer, which is supplied to the skin and muscles of the ventral and lateral parts of the bodies. Ramus communicans, it's a short branch which connects spinal nerve to the corresponding sympathetic ganglion. A sympathetic ganglion has been shown. There is an autonomic nervous system. If you want to learn autonomic nervous system, maybe in the third lecture. So that time I am going to say what are autonomic ganglia. There is an additional nervous system component known as sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic ganglia, which are swellings. There are some 18 to 22 swellings which are there, and they are all connected by ramus communicans. What is the importance of ramus communicans? Spinal cord is a part of the central nervous system, and by traditional method of classification, the nerves are all part of the peripheral nervous system. So central nervous system gets connected with the peripheral nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system gets connected with the autonomic nervous system, because the sympathetic ganglia are part of the ANS, autonomic nervous system. So it seems that the ramus communicans will be a good link between central to peripheral, peripheral to the autonomic nervous system, and we are going to learn some detailing about this when we are going to learn the autonomic nervous system. I am going to talk about this ramus communicans once again. So this is what is the account of the spinal nerve. I'll repeat a few things. Spinal nerve have total 31 pairs, and these nerves, they have double origin, each one of them, and all of them are mixed, and each has got a dorsal root and a ventral root, and dorsal root alone has a swelling because lots of cell bodies of the sensory neurons are located here, and the union of the dorsal and the ventral root will take place inside the vertebral column, and the spinal nerve comes out, and spinal nerve will divide into ramus dorsalis, ramus ventralis, and ramus communicans. I think this is what we have learned about the spinal nerves. Then what we have to learn after a while will be cranial nerves. So what we have learned till now is about the concept of nerve, what a nerve is, and then we have considered the details of the spinal nerve. Now what remains now for today's lecture is about the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are obviously those which start from brain. What do you mean by cranial? Cranial is the brain box. But ultimately, when you talk of cranial nerves, what you are trying to communicate is you are talking of the nerves starting from the brain. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. I think on page number 6 of the notes, the table is already given. Please refer to notes, page number 6. All those 12 cranial nerves have been mentioned. And in the state board book, here on page number 196, 197, there is a big table. Can you see this big table? Page 196 and 197, there is a table of cranial nerves. These two you will refer, but I think you will be more comfortable with this simply because this is simplified. And in NCERT, I will find out a page number. Sorry, no mention of cranial nerves, as if the brain is without nerves according to NCERT. Fine. I don't want to hurt you because I know your feelings for NCERT. It is for NEET and so on and so forth. But can you imagine brain without nerves? You can't imagine. And can you imagine your understanding of the brain without cranial nerves and going to medical? It's very difficult to imagine. So let's now be very sure that we have to learn the cranial nerves, and there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and they are all single origin. What do you mean by single origin? It means it doesn't have double origin. Do you understand what I am trying to say? What is double origin? We have learned it already for the spinal nerves. Every spinal nerve has a dorsal root and a ventral root, and the two roots join together to form the spinal nerve. And that is what is called as double origin. But when it comes to the cranial nerves, look here at this particular sketch. All these various cranial nerves, olfactory and optic and all other cranial nerves, they will be starting as a single stalk, as a single origin. You don't have dorsal and ventral, nothing of that sort. And that's how all of them have single origin. Something very interesting and important, amniotes. I'm sorry, I should write it here. Amniotes have 12 pairs and anamniotes have 10 pairs. Do you understand? Do you remember what are amniotes and anamniotes? Amniotes, I'll simply write down reptiles, ales, and mammals. These are amniotes. What do you mean by amniotes? Amniotes are those vertebrates which have the fetal membranes. Do you understand what are fetal membranes? Amnion, chorion, and yolk sac, and allantois also, of course. Those are the fetal membranes. Only reptiles, birds, that is ales, and mammals, they have the fetal membranes, so they are called as amniotes. Amniotes have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Mammals are amniotes. Birds and reptiles are amniotes. And the names of those 12 nerves will be exactly the same, and the details will also be almost the same. What is all this? This is a very clear indication of evolution. That the amniotes which have evolved from the anamniotes. What do you mean by anamniotes? Fishes and amphibia. Fishes and amphibia, their development takes place in water, so they don't need any fetal membrane, so they are called as anamniotes, and they have 10 pairs. You should know that some group of amphibia gave rise to reptilia. Some group of amphibia gave rise to reptilia, and reptiles gave rise to birds and mammals. So very clear indication of evolution that the number of cranial nerves have increased. That is also quite interesting. Fishes and amphibians do not have a very well defined neck. Fishes and amphibians do not have a very well defined neck. Exceptions are there, salamanders and all. But most of the fishes and amphibia don't have a well defined neck. Reptile, birds and mammals have better defined neck. Why I am talking of neck? Because the last two additional nerves, if they have 12 pairs and these are 10 pairs, why 2 have been added? Because there are 2 additional nerves, the last 2, 11th and 12th, have been added, which will provide the muscles for the neck and the shoulder. Evolution. You cannot learn biology in a blank way. Learning biology in a blank way is like what I should say. Learning or trying to consume vada pav with a vada. I'm sorry, I should not give you such analogies. You are not able to go out these days and not being able. Can you imagine therefore? How can your vada pav be without vada? Only pav? No. Without evolution, anything that is learned in biology will go waste, even for the medical science. All medical science is based on evolution, because with the confidence that we try to treat the human body, our deep in our mind is the fact that if a particular medicine, a particular design, a particular event, mechanism is applicable to rat, it is applicable to humans also, because experiments are done on those. Please understand, therefore, without zoology, without evolution, medical science will be impossible. And you want to go to medical science, so be very sure, try to understand this, and you'll have a better medical education. What I am trying to say, that anamniotes have only 10 pairs, amniotes have 12 pairs, 2 pairs have been added, and the names will remain the same. We are going to talk about those names after a while. So there are 12 pairs, all of them have single pairs. The reptiles, birds and mammals have 12 pairs, but the primitive groups, fishes and amphibia, have 10 pairs. When we talk of the origin, there is a column here, origin, insertion. Okay, the third column. And in the book here also there is a column, origin. Third column here is origin. There is origin, and then there are 2 additional columns, organs, innervated and function. There can be some confusion, so let me make clear that confusion. It is possible to talk of I'll talk of this column, origin and insertion. According to one of the concepts, all origin is from brain. Spinal nerves, they originate from spinal cord. So cranial nerves, they originate from brain, obvious. However, it is also possible to think that way, that I have mentioned here, olfactory nerve, and it originates from olfactory epithelium. The second nerve, optic nerve, it originates from retina of eye. Why all this? Because if you think of the functionality, if you think of the direction of conduction of message, then I think it is possible to say that the origin of the olfactory nerve is olfactory capsule, and origin of the optic nerve is the retina of the eye. But this is not very popular. If you want to go by functional, that's what I am trying to say. If you go by the function, I mean the direction of sensation, because these are sensory nerves. 1, 2 and 8. These are sensory nerves. And these sensory nerves, they will carry the sensation from the receptors. Olfactory will be olfactory nerves will be carrying the sensation from the nasal capsule to brain. Optic nerve will carry the sensation from the eyes to brain, and auditory, which is better called as vestibulocochlear nowadays, will be carrying the sensation from the internal ear to the brain. So if you think of the directions, then you can say that olfactory, optic and auditory, they originate from the receptors, that is sense organs. But many times this is not generally accepted, and therefore usually overall you can say that all of them are originating from brain. But when you say it is originating from brain, then you may wonder which part of the brain. So if you want to say that, then 2 of the 12 will originate from forebrain. The 2 of the 12 are here, olfactory and optic. Olfactory and optic will be originating from the forebrain. Forebrain, you know already there are olfactory bulbs, olfactory lobes, and they are part of the cerebrum. And the optic nerves, which are making a cross just near to the pituitary, they will be originating from the diencephalon. Okay, so these first two will be originating from forebrain. The next 2, 3 and 4, will be originating from midbrain. It will not be visible clearly here because midbrain itself is so small that it will be rather difficult to show you the origin in this diagram, but we will have our diagram, diagram number 7, but for that we will come to little later on. 4 out of the 12, 4, which 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, these originate from pons. You can check it here. These are some of those which are originating from pons. And 9, 10, 11 and 12, they originate from medulla. I think we can have a look at the next picture where you can check these things. Once again, you can imagine, you can study this diagram. You know that here will be the pons and this is the medulla. So 2 from forebrain, 2 from midbrain, and all the remaining 8 are from hindbrain. 2 plus 2, 4, but most of them are originating from hindbrain. 4 from pons and 4 from medulla oblongata. Which are those 4 which are originating from pons? You can expect 5, 6, 7 and 8. These 10 nerves are originating from pons. And which are the 4 which are originating from medulla? The next 4, 9, 10, 11 and 12. It means that if you know the parts of the brain in sequence, it is not at all difficult to remember the origins. Because here in the state board book they have given the origin column, and how to remember this? It's very simple. 2 plus 2 and 8. 8 because pons and medulla are part of the hindbrain, and 4 from pons and 4 from the medulla oblongata. So you can remember that. Is it possible to ask MCQs for this? Why not? They should definitely be asked. असं तुम्ही गृहीत धरत नका की फक्त एनसीईआरटी वाक्यावरच फक्त प्रश्न येतात. फक्त नीटचाच का विचार करायचा? There are many other exams. CET is also there, and many other entrance exams for various courses are there. आणि ते सगळे एंट्रन्स एक्झाम जाऊ द्या हो. आपली 12वी पर्यंत बायोलॉजी शिकलो आणि क्रेनियल नर्व्स माहित नसतील आणि त्याची ओरिजिन माहित नसतील तर मेडिकल जायचा संबंध काय आपला, असा विचार तुम्ही करायला पाहिजे. मी तर करणारच आणि सांगणारच. सो प्लीज बी केअरफुल. यू शुड नो 2 from forebrain, 2 from midbrain, 8 from hindbrain. Out of the 8, 4 from pons and 4 from medulla. If necessary, I will comment on this little later on. याच्या पलीकडे जास्त मात्र काही तुम्ही करत असू नका. So if there is confusion likely here in this third column of the notes and in the textbook, yeah, try to remember what I am trying to communicate. तुम्ही काय करायला पाहिजे, जिथे असं कन्फ्युजनचे पॉइंट्स आहे ना, एक निर्णय घेऊन टाकायचा. निर्णय घेण्याची क्षमता महत्वाची आणि आपल्या इंटरेस्ट नोटबुकमध्ये लिहून टाकायचं. मग मी काय सांगतो आणि पुस्तक काय सांगतो त्याच्याकडे दुर्लक्ष करा. इफ यू वॉन्ट टू फॉलो द स्टेट बोर्ड बुक, फाईन, दॅट इज व्हॉट आय एम ट्राइंग टू से. ऑल दिस आय एम रायटिंग अकॉर्डिंग टू स्टेट बोर्ड बुक ओनली. And still, if you feel that it is a good idea to consider sensory nerves to start from the receptors, at least keep in mind. Okay, that point is over. So 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and I think it is now high time for us to know the names. Okay, in the regular class, what is done is I say that term, the name, and students repeat. Let us imagine we are in a regular classroom. I'll say it and you repeat. तुम्ही एकटे असाल तर घरच्यांना काही न बोलवून घ्या, सगळ्यांनी म्हणून कोरस मध्ये म्हणा. पण स्टार्ट. मला वाटतं आता कौस्तुभ सर पण माझ्याबरोबर म्हणतील, म्हणजे कौस्तुभ सर आता आपले रिप्रेझेंटेटिव्ह असतील, त्यांच्याबरोबर तुम्ही पण म्हणा. लेट अस स्टार्ट. Olfactory. Optic. Oculomotor. Trochlear. Trigeminal. Abducens. Facial. Auditory. Glossopharyngeal. Vagus. Spinal accessory. Hypoglossal. It's very simple, it's very plain. Let's repeat once again. Olfactory, optic, oculomotor. Trochlear, trigeminal abducens. Facial, auditory, glossopharyngeal. Vagus, spinal accessory, hypoglossal. So that is how you have to repeatedly say, शब्द तोंडात बसायला वेळ लागतो. Sequence ही महत्वाचा आहे. And all of them are given the Roman numbers. That's very important. So here also you'll find an any diagram anywhere in the world. These are indicated always by Roman numbers. So please remember it. We'll try to remember this in sequence. And there is a mnemonic which is given at the end of the page number 6. What's up? On occasion of trip, the attractive features are green villages surrounding hills. आता तुम्हाला इतकं लक्षात ठेवायचं असतं, इतकं बायोलॉजी, एवढं मोठं केमिस्ट्री, फिजिक्स लक्षात ठेवण्यापेक्षा फिजिक्स लक्षात नाही ठेवावं लागत, फिजिक्स सॉल्व्ह करावं लागतं वगैरे. पण मग ज्या वेळेला बायोलॉजी केमिस्ट्रीमध्ये एवढं मोठी मेमरी लागते तर काही वेळा अशी ट्रिक्स करतात. सी द सेंटेन्स. ऑन ऑकेजन ऑफ ट्रिप द अट्रॅक्टिव्ह फीचर्स आर ग्रीन विलेजेस सराउंडिंग हिल्स. तुम्हाला हे कळतं. ऑन ऑल्फॅक्टरी, ऑकेजन ओ, ऑप्टिक, ऑफ, कंटिन्यू. So like that. So you can read the first letter of each word and then remember this sequence. I know it takes time, but you should definitely do it. So remember the names, remember the sequence, and so on. All these nerves, they come out of the skull. Spinal cord is in the vertebral column, and the brain is in the skull. And from where will they come out? Because spinal nerves come out of the intervertebral foramina, that you know very well. Now the skull, I can show you the skull, and here you can expect on the surface of the skull you will have a lot of apertures. I will not be able to show them all here very clearly, but you can see that a lot of apertures are there, a lot of holes are there, and through these holes these nerves will come out. So there will be a lot of apertures, and there are lots of complicated pathways, and you will have to remember the holes. एक लक्षात घ्या, तुम्ही मेडिकल जाणार म्हणता, हरकत नाही, खतरनाक असते ती वायवा मध्ये जर तुम्ही फेल झाला
तोंडी बोलता आलं पाहिजे. ते स्कल घेऊन बसतील, ते कुठली यातनं कुठली क्रेनियल नर्व येते, यातनं कुठली येते, यातली कुठली येते ते सांगा. फार महत्वाचं आहे. याची नावं पण आहेत या पोल्सची. सो बी व्हेरी केअरफुल. आपण जे लर्निंग सेंटरला करतो हे फक्त नीटसाठी नाहीये, तुमच्या मेडिकलच्या फर्स्ट इयरसाठी आहे असं समजायला काय हरकत आहे. आणि त्यामुळे तुम्ही सगळे छान यशस्वी व्हाल. सो ऑल्दो आय कॅनॉट शो यू द डिटेल्स, I will definitely help you to understand that there are different holes in the skull, foramina. Holes in the general term, let us call it as foramina, through which the cranial nerves emerge out. So, with all this background, I think it is good for us to think of the classification of the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves can be classified this way: sensory, motor, and mixed. 3 of the 12 are sensory. I had already mentioned this earlier. First, second, and 8, they are sensory. What do you mean by sensory nerve? We have already considered this. Nerves can be classified as sensory, motor, and mixed. Sensory nerves are those in which all fibers are taking the impulse from receptor, that is from sense organ to brain. Olfactory, all the fibers will be from the olfactory capsule and they will be taking the message to the brain. Optic, all the fibers, all the axons will be from the retina, and all of them will be going to the brain. The optic nerves will have only sensory fibers. And auditory, which is better called as vestibulo-cochlear. We are going to talk more about this later on. This will be going from the internal ear. So from the internal ear, all the fibers will be going to the brain. So it's one-way traffic, sensory, from receptor to brain. Then what do you mean by motor? The reverse, from brain to different muscles and organs. So 3, 4, 6, 3, 4, 6, 11 and 12. These are called as motor nerves. 3, 4, 6, 11 and 12 are being called as motor nerves. So 3 sensory, 5 motor and 4 are mixed. What is a mixed nerve? I think it was also told to you that a mixed nerve will have some fibers sensory and some fibers motor. Once again, sensory nerves are those where all the fibers are sensory, going from receptor to brain. Motor nerves are those which have all the fibers which are motor, that means from brain to the different muscles and parts, organs. And mixed nerve, like trigeminal for example, 5, 7, 9 and 10. 5, 7, 9 and 10 are mixed nerve because, let us take the example of the trigeminal. It will bring the messages from the receptor to the brain, and it will also, some of the fibers will carry the messages from brain to the muscles and so on. Vagus you have heard many times, and this vagus nerve will be having, vagus is all supplied to the viscera, and the vagus nerve will try to bring the messages, sensory messages from the different visceral organs to the brain. And the vagus nerve will also send the orders, instructions from brain to the different organs. So it will also have mixed, some fibers sensory, some fibers motor. So this is a very important classification. Let me tell you once again. What you have to remember is, you have to remember the names in sequence. That's one thing. Then you have to remember the origin, from which part of the brain the nerves are originated. And then you will also have to remember which are sensory, which are motor, and which are mixed. My God, many times this is all being asked in the MCQ form. You have to know the sequence. So that is it. Then we'll continue with some more ideas. So once again, 3 sensory, 5 motor, and 4 mixed. Olfactory, optic. Oculomotor, trochlear. Trigeminal. 6th is abducens. 7th is facial. 8th is auditory, better called as vestibulo-cochlear. 9th is glossopharyngeal. 10th is vagus. And then 11th spinal accessory, and 12th hypoglossal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. लक्षात राहून जाईल तुमच्या. वर्क करावं लागेल थोडंसं. डायग्राम, ती जी डायग्राम आहे त्याच्याकडे आपण जाऊ का. तुमच्याकडे तुमच्या पुस्तकामध्ये डायग्राम शीटमध्ये डायग्राम 7 दिली आहे. विल गो फॉर डायग्राम 7. Diagram 3 also, but diagram 3 is not much useful. It's only the underside of the brain. I think diagram 7 will be useful, and we'll go for that. But you have to remember, you have to take pains. It is rather easy to talk about spinal nerve and easy to remember the spinal nerves, but there are some more details of the cranial nerves, and therefore we should be very careful. I think with all this, we'll go finally to understand the diagram number 7 in our diagram sheet, which is now being projected. I think this is a fairly good presentation of the various origins of the cranial nerves. You know that this is the olfactory bulb and this is the olfactory tract. Olfactory bulb and olfactory tract, but before that there is an olfactory nerve. It's very, very tiny naturally, and it is starting from the nasal capsule. That is one. Optic, there's an optic nerve which is making a cross, optic chiasma. You can also refer to diagram 3 of the first page. Optic cross is there. The two optic nerves, they cross each other. That's very popular. That's called as optic cross or optic chiasma. And there are fiber distribution within that. That is 2. So these two, the olfactory and the optic, they are starting from the forebrain. Next two will be starting from midbrain. Which are the next two? 3 and 4. 3. So this is the one, oculomotor. 4. This is the one, that is trochlear. These are starting from the midbrain. But the midbrain is very tiny, less developed, and it is hidden below the cerebrum and also below the pons. This is pons. This is medulla. Medulla pons. So these are the part of the hindbrain. And this is all forebrain. But hindbrain is very tiny and it is all pressed. It is pressed below the cerebrum and above the pons, so that's not seen. So clear-cut origins cannot be observed. You can see the nerves, oculomotor and trochlear. But from where are they beginning? They are starting from inside, and that is from the midbrain. We'll go for 5. I think this is the bombastic nerve, a very big, the thickest nerve, the trigeminal. You can't miss it. And this trigeminal nerve is starting from pons. First 2 from the forebrain, 1 and 2. Next 2, 3 and 4 from the midbrain. All the remaining 8 are from hindbrain. Out of the 8 from hindbrain, 4 are starting from pons and 4 from medulla. Let us see the 4 which are starting from the pons. 5th. Then also the 6th, abducens. And then the 7th, facial, and then the 8th, vestibulocochlear. These 4, which 4? 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are all starting from pons. Then medulla, you have last 4. Which are the last 4? 9, 10, 11, 12. 9. The glossopharyngeal, 9. So this is the glossopharyngeal. 10, the vagus. 9 and 10. 11 and 12. This is the 11. Accessory or spinal accessory. And 12, hypoglossal. So these 4, these are all starting. 1, 2, 3 and 4. They are starting from medulla. This is medulla. It is much more complicated than what we are thinking, but imagine you have gone admission, you have taken admission to medical college, and then you are dissecting human body. मग शेवटी ह्युमन बॉडीचं मग ते स्कल फोडून ब्रेन तुम्हाला काढावं लागेल आणि ब्रेनच्या अंडर साईडला तुम्हाला हे सर्व रोजीज दाखवावे लागतील. ज्या नीटची तुम्ही तयारी करताय आणि मेडिकल जायचं म्हणताय, तुम्हाला एवढं सुद्धा माहित नसेल 12वीमध्ये आणि तुम्ही एकदम मेडिकल जाऊन कराल काय? तुम्ही लर्निंग सेंटरच्या विद्यार्थ्यांना प्रॉब्लेम येत नाही कारण तुम्ही शिकलेला असतात. ओके, सो इट्स गुड दॅट इन द बोर्ड बुक दे हॅव गिवन अ चार्ट, अनफॉर्च्युनेटली नॉट डायग्राम. पण मग आपण आता चार्टही दिलेला आहे नोट्समध्ये आणि डायग्राम दिलेला आहे, व्यवस्थित करा. ओके, सो यू शुड नो दीज ओरिजिन्स. तर ही डायग्राम तुम्ही तुमच्याकडे तुमच्या PDF फॉर्ममध्ये येईलच आणि ती तुम्ही बघत राहा. Next now go for the diagram that is available in our diagram sheet. Let us go for that diagram once again. प्रॉपर आणखी एक आपण पिक्चर आहे ते पण बघूया त्या ओरिजिन्सचं. आय थिंक विल गो फॉर दॅट. ह्याच्या आधी लेट्स गो फॉर दॅट पिक्चर. आणखी एक आहे मला असं वाटतं पण ते दिस इज गुड. आता तुम्हीच बघा बरं, हे बघत राहा आणि शोधा काय कुठे आहे ते. स्टडी द डायग्राम केअरफुली. Actually, this is the olfactory bulb and olfactory tract. Olfactory nerve दाखवले पण इथे छोटीशी olfactory nerve आहे. This is olfactory nerve which they have not labeled. So there is olfactory nerve. हे नाही बरं का. This is not olfactory nerve. This is olfactory bulb and olfactory tract. This diagram will correspond to the diagram number 3 of our diagram sheet. त्यामुळे तिथे सुद्धा बरं का olfactory nerve असं आपण म्हणत नाही, olfactory bulb म्हणतेलं आहे. हे बघा इथे diagram आपली. Here I will show you olfactory bulb and this is the olfactory tract. The olfactory nerve is very tiny. So here will be the olfactory nerve which is not shown here. Olfactory nerve leads to olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb leads to olfactory tract, and olfactory tract will be then joining the temporal lobe. This one and this one, these are optic lobes. I'm sorry, the optic nerve, the second nerve. And they are looking across. Then the oculomotor third and the trochlear fourth, and these are starting from inside the midbrain. And then this is the pons and this is the middle oblongata. From pons you are expecting the trigeminal, a very thick one which has got branches, and also the abducens. Sixth nerve will be abducens, and then there will be 7th and 8th which are all starting from the pons, and then the remaining nerves are starting from the medulla. प्रयत्न आमचा असा आहे की तुम्ही मेडिकलला जा का जाऊ नका, तुम्हाला ह्युमन बॉडी चांगली कळली पाहिजे. आणि मेडिकलला जाणाऱ्यांना ह्युमन बॉडी कळणारच आहे, आणि जे जाणार नाही, जे मेजॉरिटी ऑफ स्टुडंट जाऊ शकत नाही, त्यांना ह्युमन बॉडी कळणं फारच महत्वाचं आहे, कारण त्यांच्यासाठी फर्स्ट आणि कदाचित लास्ट ऑपॉर्च्युनिटी असेल. सो लेट्स एन्जॉय. So with that we'll go to our typical diagram, that is diagram number 7. I'll help you to understand that diagram, and that will be the final end of the lecture. इथे तुम्हाला carefully वाचलं पाहिजे. Once again, so there will be olfactory nerve here, okay, 1, and this is the optic nerve which is making across. So 1 and 2. Here there are 3 nerves shown. Which are the 3 nerves? Oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens. These are all 3 nerves together. Why? Refer to the chart. Be very careful and refer to the chart. There is something very special. The muscles of the eye are provided with 3 nerves. Out of 12, 3 nerves are supplied to the muscles of the eye. Which are those 3 nerves? Oculomotor, number 3. Trochlear, number 4. Both of them are originating from midbrain. And abducens, which is the 6th nerve, and it is originating from pons. Read carefully in the chart. The 3rd, the 4th, and the 6th, they are all supplied to muscles of eye, and they are motor nerves. You know this very well. They are motor nerves. 3 is motor, 4 is motor, and 6th is motor. And these 3 motor nerves to eye muscles. What is all this? Out of 12, eye is so important, so that out of 12 nerves you have 3 nerves going to the eye? Yes, because the potential of the eye to understand the environment and then if possible regulate the environment is enormous. You know, eyes can be moved up and down, then side to side, and they can also be swollen like this. It means that the eyes as a receptor means a lot to vertebrates, and that's how out of 12 pairs, 3 pairs, all vertebrates have all these 3 pairs supplied to the eye muscles. Eye muscles we are going to learn. At that time I am going to talk, but then there are certain mentions here, like I think not here, but in the state board book they are mentioning superior oblique, inferior oblique, superior rectus, inferior rectus, etc., etc. So there are muscles, and those muscle pairs have names, and we are going to study that little later on. You don't need to know all things about the muscles which are around the eye, not inside the eye. Outside the eye there are muscles, oblique muscles and rectus muscles and so on. We are not going to learn that today, but please understand, to move those muscles, to regulate the movement of those muscles, the 3 out of 12 cranial nerves are supplied. So remember that. So this, to help you understand the diagram, this is 3 nerves together. This is 1 and 2, and these are the remaining 3 and 4 and 6. This is the 5th one, the trigeminal. And trigeminal, as you can refer into the book, there are 3 branches, which are the 3 branches of the trigeminal. Read carefully. In the notes, it is not mentioned, but it is being mentioned here in the book. 3 branches of trigeminal are ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. So, ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. These are the 3 branches, and the distribution is being shown. Then this 6th is already gone here. So this is 7th nerve now. This is the 7th nerve, and the 7th nerve is being distributed in these 2 areas which are mentioned here. And then the 8th nerve, something special about 8th nerve I have to say. We are going to learn that the 8th nerve will have 2 components. I think because of 10th you have learned something about the internal ear. You are aware that there is a hearing part of the nerve that is called as cochlea, the spinal organ, cochlea. And there are 3 canals, semicircular canals, which is for balancing. I think most of us know that internal ear has double function. Which are the 2 functions of the internal ear? Balancing and hearing. The 2 functions do not seem to be related. The balancing function will have some fibers, sensory fibers, which will be originating from the semicircular canals of the internal ear, and they will be meeting the pons. So it seems that the 8th nerve will have the hearing sensation, the balancing sensation that will be coming from the semicircular canals, and the hearing sensation will come from medulla. Although 8th nerve we usually consider as the one that starts from pons, that you know very well, because 5, 6, 7, 8 these are starting from pons. But pons, with respect to 8th, only part of the 8th will have its origin in the pons, and that is related to equilibrium. And from the medulla, the sensation will be coming from the cochlea, and cochlea will receive the sensation into the medulla. This is a small thing. That's something very special for nerve number 8. But otherwise, you can say 8th is vestibulocochlear and is starting from pons, although partly it is from pons and partly from medulla. Then you have the 9, 10, and so this is the vestibulocochlear, and this is then the glossopharyngeal, and this is the vagus. This is all supplied to the vagus. This is 9, 10, 11, and 12. Once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, and this is all combined together 3, 4, and 6 because they are going to eye muscles. Then this is 5th. Then this is 7th. This and this together 7th distribution wise. Then this is 8th, and this is 9, and this is all 10 branches are shown. 10th. This is 11, and this is 12. Even if you don't remember everything around, that does not matter. But I am trying to convince you to understand the origins and the distribution. I think in the state board book they are giving rather good account, no doubt, but rather too much. So all these various details about the organs innervated, I think you may not read. So the organs innervated part you can read and try to understand. For example, oculomotor eye muscles, 4 out of 6 eye muscles, and the pathetic eye muscles, 1 of 6 eye muscles. I think that will be too much for you because we don't know the eye muscles yet, and so on and so on. So use this chart, no doubt, but to a lesser extent. And for most of you, I think you should be happy with the chart that is being given here. Even then we will try to read. I'll restrict myself to this chapter. Olfactory, sensory, and it is originating from nasal epithelium, but then you may say that it is originating from the forebrain. Optic, it is sensory, it originates from retina of the eye, that is according to functional design, otherwise you can say it is originating from the forebrain. Third, oculomotor. It's a kind of a motor nerve, it innervates muscles of eyeball, iris, muscles to change the shape of the lens, and muscles of two-tier gland. All these are related to the eye. Iris, this very well. So iris can be the diameter can be increased or decreased. Iris muscles to change the shape of the lens. If required, the curvature of the lens can be slightly changed as per need. And muscles of the etier glands. And trochlear, that is also being called as pathetic, and its function is innervates muscles of the eye. I think that account has already been told to you. Trigeminal is mixed and it has got 3 branches, very prominent, and the trigeminal is sensory fibers from skin of face because it's a mixed nerve, and motor fibers to the chewing muscles. In the skateboard book, many details are given that you can read it once you go into first year MBBS. कदाचित तुम्हाला हे पण पुस्तक वापरावं लागेल नंतर एनसीआरटी तर काहीच उपयोग होणार नाही. काही म्हणतात ते म्हणणार की आम्ही ह्या नोट्स आहेत ना ह्या पण आम्ही फर्स्ट इयर एमबीबीएस ला वापरतो आणि काही चूक नाही आहे. ओके, देन go for the abducens, innervates muscles of the eyeball, and facial. There's some common thing between the fifth and seventh. Fifth and seventh both are related to the face. Facial, sensory fibers from the anterior two-third part of the tongue. Taste. So taste sensation is carried. Sensation of the taste will be carried from the tongue to the brain, two-third part. Motor fibers for facial muscles and salivary glands. Fifth and seventh, mostly the fifth nerve and the seventh nerve is branches seem to be distributed to the head, jaws, tongue. Facial expression. वर्गात ही संधी मला मिळायची आता मिळत नाही पण मी आता बघतो प्रयत्न करू. व्हॉट्स गोइंग ऑन? ही जी मी आता व्हॉट्स गोइंग ऑन असं नाही म्हटलं. व्हॉट्स गोइंग ऑन? Facial expression will match with the words. I can change the expression as per my will and wish. I can change the expression of my face as per my will and wish. So there will be nerves coming from the seventh nerve. There will be fibers coming to the muscles of the face for facial expression. So facial muscles. That's it. Then come to auditory. I told you there is vestibulocochlear. There is being called as vestibulocochlear, and the reasons are very clearly told to you. So it originates from cochlea, or you can say it originates from pons. आता कॉक्लिया पासून ओरिजिन म्हणायचं का पॉन्स पासून, तर मी तुम्हाला म्हणतो की ट्रॅडिशनली आपण ते पॉन्स पासून म्हणू, पण जर तुम्ही फंक्शनल बघितलं तर ते कॉक्लिया पासून आहे. originates from cochlea, and for balancing it is originating from semicircular canals. Glossopharyngeal is again mixed. Sensory fibers from the posterior 1/3 part of the tongue. See, the tongue will have anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3. Anterior 2/3 sensory sensation from the tongue will go through the seventh, and the posterior 1/3 the sensory sensation will go from the glossopharyngeal. So the taste sensation will be coming to the brain through which two nerves? The taste sensation will be coming to the brain through 7th and 9th, 2/3 and 1/3. Motor fibers to salivary glands and pharynx. असे प्रश्न विचारू शकतो ना, which are the nerves which are supplying to the salivary glands? बघा बरं शोधा. Clearly 7th and 9th. साहजिकच आहे की नाही? जे तुम्हाला सेन्सेशन येतं, टेस्ट सेन्सेशन आलं की salivary secretion होतं. टेस्ट सेन्सेशन आलं की salivary secretion होईल. So obviously therefore those nerves which are concerned with taste sensation will also be concerned with salivary secretion. एकदम match होतं. Taste sensation is going from tongue to brain, and salivary secretion साठी orders कुठून येतील? Salivary secretion orders will be going from brain to salivary gland. So असं अशा पद्धतीने अनालाइज करायचा, एखादी गोष्ट लक्षात ठेवायसाठी अनालाइज करावी लागते. वेगस बद्दल काय सांगावं? वेगस is the longest nerve. It's starting from the middle oblongata and it will enter into the entire body and it will have so many branches. Vagus nerve च्या खूप branches आहेत. Vagus nerve is supplied to the visceral organs. कुठे कुठे जाईल vagus nerve च्या branches? Vagus nerve branches will go to heart, lungs, will go to the stomach, intestine, liver, pancreas, spleen. सगळीकडे जाणार vagus च्या branches. Vagus च्या branches अगदी urinary bladder पर्यंत जाते. सगळीकडे. The internal organs are all supplied by the vagus nerve. Vagus is the longest nerve and with maximum branches. So that's vagus, and but of course it will have sensory as well as motor. Suppose sensation from lungs, sensation from heart, sensation from intestine, they will go to the brain. Sensation from any internal organ will go to the brain through the vagus nerve. And if the brain has to send messages to these organs, they are the motor fibers. So there will be sensory fibers as well as motor fibers making the vagus nerve. Then this is the 11th spinal accessory, innervates muscles of the shoulder and neck. Kanata vertebrates मध्ये 11th and 12th are being added in the amniotes because now the neck and the shoulders are being designed during evolution. And hypoglossal innervates muscles of the tongue. The hypoglossa, glossa means tongue. Okay, so going to the tongue. So this diagram you don't draw. There is no need to draw this diagram. And there is no need to remember all details, but you should have some information recorded in your brain. कसं असतं, खूप शिकल्यानंतर थोडंसं लक्षात राहतं. त्यामुळे असं थोडं क्लासिफाय करून घ्या. आता याच्यातले हायलाइट्स काय काय लक्षात येतील तुम्हाला हे आपण इथे लिहिलेच आहेत की विचार सेन्सरी, विचार मोटर, विचार मिक्स्ड, then which are originating from forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and then something you can remember about the eighth nerve, because eighth nerve is vestibulocochlear, so part of it will be starting from the actually it is being classified under it shows to be linked with the pons, but part of the internal connections are in the medulla also. Then 3 nerves which you must remember, 3rd, 4th and 6th. Why? Because they are supplied to eye muscles. And then you can also remember that the taste sensation comes from 7th and 9th, and salivary glands are being controlled again from 7th and 9th, and so on. I think या अर्ध्या पेजवर आपण कदाचित 30-40 मिनिटं बोललोय, पण महत्वाचं आहे कारण ह्या महत्वाच्या क्रेनियल स्पाइनल नर्व्स आर इम्पॉर्टंट, नो डाउट क्रेनियल नर्व्स आर इक्वली इम्पॉर्टंट. What else I would like to communicate is should be good enough. ड्रॉइंग करण्यात बसू नका, पण टेबल्स तयार करा. आणि मला वाटतं की हा एक प्रयत्न तुम्ही करायला पाहिजे. यू कॅन मेक 2 columns and write down the comparison of spinal nerves and cranial nerves. This will be a good exercise for you. So with this two types of nerves taken into account, spinal nerves and cranial nerves, we have completed the so-called peripheral nervous system. So central nervous system, brain, spinal cord has been covered, and the peripheral nervous system, that is spinal and cranial nerves, have been covered. We have now take up this was the second lecture, and in the third lecture we are going to take up ANS, autonomic nervous system. But then along with that we shall also consider something called reflex arc and reflex action, which is quite easy, that we will be covering, and that will be third lecture. And in the fourth lecture, the last lecture for this nervous coordination, we are going to have eye and ear and other receptors. थोडंसं ते तुमच्या टेक्स्टबुक मध्ये पण छान दिलंय बघा. दिस इज ऑन पेज नंबर 197, स्टेट बोर्ड बुक. हे बघा, डेंटिस्ट नर्व असं म्हटलंय. आता हे विचारू नको, आता डेंटिस्ट नर्व, दॅट इज ट्रायजेमिनल. का बरं त्याला डेंटिस्ट नर्व म्हटलंय? Simply because when the anesthesia injection is being given by the dental practitioner, it is to make numb the dentist nerve, because supply of the कारण त्याचा distribution बघा ना, you can see the distribution of the trigeminal. It will be supplying to the upper jaw, lower jaw, आणि तिथे ते numb होण्यासाठी. So this is Then the vagus is very popularly being called as the longest nerve, because it starts from middle of longitudinal and then enters into the entire body. And it's very interesting, it is also being called as wandering nerve. This is A, not O, not wandering. It means, it goes to the entire body. But yeah, so that's it. Shortest nerve, I think, abducens. Abducens is shortest of the nerves. So shortest is abducens and longest is vagus. तुम्ही म्हणाल olfactory का नाही, olfactory तर सगळ्यात शॉर्ट पाहिजे, पण olfactory nerve is so differently attached there to the olfactory nerves that its length is not considered seriously. What else is there? I think vagus, trigeminal, there is fifth, there is trigeminal dentis, abducens. Okay. Of the 12 pairs of canines, only 10th vagus passes to the body in the internal organs. अशा छोट्या छोट्या गोष्टी लक्षात ठेवा. इंटरेस्टिंग आहे आपला सब्जेक्ट, आपला म्हणजे आपलाच आहे. तुम्हाला सगळ्यांना बायोलॉजीमध्ये इंटरेस्ट आहे आणि बायोलॉजीमध्ये इंटरेस्ट जरी झाला पाहिजे, पुढच्या तुमच्या अनेक वर्षाच्या शिक्षणामध्ये क्रिमिनलचा उपयोग झाला पाहिजे. ओके, ऑल द बेस्ट.